It's time for MacBreak Weekly, the first show from the new TWiT Attic studio. Jason Snell is here, Andy Ihnatko, Alex Lindsay. We'll talk about the fascinating rumor that there might be a smaller Mac Mini in our future. Apple AI versus Google AI. We'll talk a little bit about what Google announced just minutes ago. Plus, the Vision Pro segment. Yes, now with rhinoceroses. It's all coming up next on MacBreak Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is MacBreak Weekly, episode 934, recorded Tuesday, August 13th, 2024. Screws, not clues. It's time for MacBreak Weekly, the show where we cover the latest news from Apple. And as I go to our rundown and see a big blank white screen, I'm thinking not a lot of news from Apple this week, but thank goodness Andy Ihnatko is here, WGBH in Boston, as he has for many months now. He's been populating the spreadsheet. Thank you, Andrew.
Happy to help. Happy to prove my worth. And there's no mystery here that there's not much news. Everybody's terrified of the Pixel, the new Pixel announcement from
Well,
Google.
did you watch it?
I didn't watch it because I was getting ready for this show, but I've been keeping myself updated. And interesting. It's as with Google, unlike Samsung, is a company that can actually get things done. But they announced a lot of things that I like and I think that are absolutely the right move. But it depends on actually shipping this thing in a couple of weeks and seeing how well it works. Yeah. But you can. All I'll say is that, because we're probably not going to talk about this in the show, that this is almost certainly why Google wanted to do this ahead of the September announcements for Apple, because Apple's going to be spending an hour saying, and maybe in the future we'll do this, and we're hoping by next year it'll do this, and we've got big plans to integrate this. Whereas Google's saying, yeah, here's live demos of it all working. It's all working right now, and we've had some of these features for about a year.
We will talk a little bit about it because it is germane. But first, let me introduce Alex Lindsay from the beautiful Lindsay Studios somewhere in Silicon Valley. Alex, of course, from WGBH. OfficeHours.global. There you go. Office Hours. Hello, Alex.
Hello. Good to be here.
Nice to see you. 090.media if you want to find out what Alex does for a living. Nobody really knows, but
complex live events.
Yes, I do. Exactly.
They go somewhere. Sometimes theaters, sometimes your phone. Just depends.
Yes. You just never know what you're going to see. Alex, I'm copying you, as you can tell. I have moved into my attic.
It looks great.
I'm actually, thank you to Anthony Nielsen, Burke McQuinn, our IT guy, Russell Tammany. They came up here and they hung lights and they did all sorts of stuff. We're going to get a lighting guy, a gaffer, as they're known in the trade. We're going to get a gaffer to crawl all over the set. But for now, I think it's pretty nice. And that is an homage to you, Jason Snell.
Thank you.
And your beautiful garage studio. I have a Mac in mine as well. Thanks to
good. Everybody should. Everybody should just have a classic Mac behind them. Yeah, Alex has got one too.
You have? Oh yeah, I didn't see that, Alex. Did you add that recently?
One here. No, they've been around. But I like to mix it, so I have some elementals here.
It does. It changes. Yeah. Finally, something to do with my $27,000 elemental. I could put it back here for green light.
I only have the front pieces to them. I don't have them. I kept the front parts of them because that was like $150,000 worth of elemental.
Yeah,
sitting there. But it's just the front plates because they changed them to orange and they sent me the I'm keeping the green ones.
So, Burke, if you're listening in the studios, rip the front off the elementals before you send them back. The elemental's a box we used to stream to other bunch of places, and now we just use Restream. Thank you, folks, Restream. And so that's why you can now watch this show live on YouTube, Twitch, Kick, Facebook, LinkedIn, of course, Discord if you're a Club TWiT member, and DDoSwillingX.com. So far, no DDoSes. I think we're okay.
Yeah, probably not a DDoS. So it's,
well, let's not discount DDoSes until we're sure there wasn't some sort of mistake that we're humanly responsible for that we'd like to fob off on something else.
Yeah, it's always good to have
I want to say
in your back pocket. If perhaps you noticed there was a little bit of a sibilance issue on TWiT on Sunday, DDoS. It was a DDoS attack.
What I will say, the only thing I'll say about that, because it's not MacBreak, but it's that it probably wasn't DDoS, but streaming to that many people is very, very hard. I just want to make sure it's not like someone just forgot to turn something on or. I
remember when the biggest live stream ever was 125,000 people, and it was mind-boggling.
Yeah,
and now we're talking 1.5 million. And Musk said he could actually get to 8 million. They kind of live tested it.
And what they're doing, even though it's only audio, is actually the low latency nature of it is really what they're doing is really, really hard. And so I just want to be. I don't think he needed to say that it was DDoS. I think he could have just said streaming to this many people is hard.
In fact, what he should have said is, we're getting such an amazing demand. So many people are tuning in. We can't sustain it. We're working on it. We'll get it to... that would have sounded better than, the hackers are going after.
The hard part is that you can't test high volume until you have high volume because you try to do it in the cloud, like you talked about doing stress tests the night before. Number one is stress tests should be done a month before, not a night before. And number two is it's really hard to reproduce what humans do, because on a live event, humans panic. So what they do is they start hitting the button over and over again, and they start refreshing the page over and over again. And
I don't know anything about that.
every one of those is a request, and they do it in a janky, like they do it in random ways. So it's hard for a computer. When you're stress testing a high volume stream, it's hard for a computer to reproduce the panic that a human will have when they can't get into the live stream that they're trying to get to.
You need that Chinese guy who has 100 iPhones on a bicycle so he can play Pokemon Go. Exactly. You need him to hitting it over and over again.
But you need 1 million of them to do that, or 100,000 of them to do that, and that's the problem. It's a really tricky business. YouTube did it slowly, and they had their growing pains 12 years ago. So. Yeah. It's new for X to have these kind of levels, but I don't.
Well, it's not. You remember Ron DeSantis, his campaign announcement, which had the same exact problem. So anyway, we don't. Yes, we're not here to diss on Elon or anything like that. We could do that in our spare time.
Yeah.
We're here to talk,
and we do.
We're here to
for sport.
For sport, nonetheless.
That's actually a topic on the docket for NPR for Thursday.
Is it really? Yeah. Well, there's a technical
Elon
side to
Elon.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll probably talk about it on TWiT. I mean, but there's enough Apple news, I think, to fill the docket for today. I was going to lead with a rumor, but a rumor I like, that the next Mac Mini will be about the size of an Apple TV.
Yeah,
more mini Mac Mini. Yeah,
I love that.
I've been saying that for a while. That you take, even if you have to sacrifice features to say here is just to making it a great product, a Mac inside a case of a Mac Mini and all the limitations that incurs. That's an amazing product, particularly if they can beat a certain price point with it. I don't know if this is according to a rumor from Mark Gurman, but. It's only in these recent rumors did it sort of occur to a lot of people, including myself, that the form factor of the current Mac Mini was there to accommodate things like replaceable memory, to accommodate like 2.5-inch like notebook style 2-inch hard drives, none of which are operable anymore. So now you're basically just limited to how big does the power supply have to be, how big does the board have to be, and that's pretty much all there is. So yeah, a Mac Mini you can just VESA mount to the back of anything without having to feel as though you need an extra special support. That is a hell of a product.
When they make the movie, the made-for-TV movie of this, like the BlackBerry movie, there'll be some guy who said, "Hey, wait a minute. That system on a chip does everything. We could make it this big." So I hope they do that. I hope it's not just a rumor.
The first Mac that can be fitted nasally. Yes.
I think this is the truth, is that it's been 15 years since they updated the Mac Mini enclosure. In fact, I wrote a column 7 years ago saying they should do this. That's how long they've been sitting on this old design that was designed for an era with optical drives and spinning hard drives. And if you look at the guts of a MacBook Air today, there's nothing in there, or an iPad Pro, right? Like the M4 iPads, there's nothing. It's just this teeny tiny little bit. So the Mac Mini doesn't need much of that, other than maybe some surface area for ports. I would say that they did break the seal on forward ports with the Mac Studio, so they can put some ports. If you look at like the mini NUCs from Intel, like there's ports on the front and the back. You could do that, especially on the Pro model that Gurman says is coming. This is not just an M4, but also an M4 Pro. You can get a bunch of ports in there. It's not necessarily USB-A ports.
Here's Jason, a younger,
in my
smoother
40s,
skin,
less cynical,
Jason Snell from 2017,
less weary of the world.
Yeah, exactly right.
So innocent.
So innocent
hoping
back
for a
then.
small Mac Mini revival.
Yeah, and we finally looks like are going to get it. And
took
and
a
with
while
with both the base and the Pro. I mean, it shows you how low priority it is for them. But Apple TV is a great example. It sounds like, according to Gurman, it's going to be like more like the previous generation of Apple TVs that were a little taller, but like a very small footprint. And I've heard a lot of criticism from people who say, why is Apple obsessed with making it smaller? It doesn't matter. It's just a desktop computer. But the fact is, like, it's fundamental to what the Mac Mini is, that it fits in the cracks, right? It is for whatever. Its base use case is whatever you can think of, right? Like that, it fills all gaps. It's like the spackle of the Mac marker. Like it'll fill any gap you want. And having it be small so you can tuck it in a closet or put it in, tape it under a desk or whatever, it just adds to what it is all along. And let's, again, that big aluminum enclosure is not necessary because there's very little inside it but air at this point.
And if you look at this is a Melee, and this has got, I got 3 USB-As on one side. I've got 2 HDMIs on the other side, an Ethernet port, another A, a C, and even a locking mechanism on one side. So there's a lot of ports here, the same number of ports that I have in the Mac Mini, in something that's half the size of the Mac Mini.
Well, but what's in the Melee? It's not a giant.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be a small set. But imagine, like, already there are people whose setups are a Mac Mini plus an iPad Pro for the display. Imagine people just tossing like a hockey puck sized Mac in their bag because the iPad Pro is the best machine for them for a travel device. But when they get to the hotel, when they get to their friend's house, or even when they get to a sufficiently lenient Starbucks that doesn't mind people sitting there for 4 hours, being able to simply use that as an external display for a headless Mac that size, it really does punch into what particularly Alex, but I think all of us have been saying about the Mac Mini. The biggest feature of it is its versatility. It can be your main home desktop machine. That's bring your own screen, bring your own keyboard, but it can be the thing you put into a server because you don't like the administration software that your server software comes with. So you're just going to use the Mini as something that you use to admin the rest of the stuff, or as something to run a Plex or a media server on. It's like it'd be so in line with everything the Mac Mini is great at, and it really gets me excited.
And the low power, the M4, if that's what they're going to put into it, is going to be screaming fast for the size that it is. It's not going to be something you could be doing. You could have this little puck, and when you think about people doing, when you think about hybrid, where people are coming, working at, partially remote, partially there, having that little puck that you put in, you hook it up when you get to the office, hook it up when you get to home, and it's all just got all of the stuff there. It's a pretty interesting, and my question is, and I think that the answer is they'll keep both lines, but it does start to blur the line of like, do you need an Apple TV? Like, do you need an Apple TV, or do you make this thing a $399 or $299, like a $299, and you put it into Apple TV mode? You can flip it to Apple TV mode, so it just acts like an Apple TV, or you can flip it and it's a full computer, or back and forth. I mean, I don't know if you need it. That would be really nice. But I'm also thinking that what if they were also to go for broke and say, oh, by the way, it's USB powered, but it also will work off of a power bank, so that you could really have. I think it's really important for them to get rid of to go to USB-C. I agree with you. I think that the power supply is a big piece of what's still inside. There's no reason why USB-C can't deliver the power that the Mac, especially a smaller Mac Mini, would need. There's just no reason to not have it.
If it's basically a MacBook Air or a MacBook Pro, USB-C power should not be an issue. Yeah. And I mean, remember the power, it's not just M4 we're talking about here. We're also saying, according to Gurman, there's going to be an M4 Pro option just like there is a Pro option on the existing Mac Mini. So that's a lot of power. In
I wonder whether the Pro version still ends up being the same size, and has more ports or does whatever, and the base versions are smaller. Because it does feel like that would be harder to fit in there, but it's totally possible.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's a good point that Jason makes, because like off the side here, I've got an Apple, I think it's like a 60-watt power adapter USB that came with my that I got with my MacBook. And next to it is an Anker gallium selenide gas adapter that I bought like a year ago, and also during the sale. That is in itself delivers enough power it's 100 watts, so it can power both my MacBook and the and the iPad Pro I've got on top of me. So it would be a damn shame if you couldn't just simply power a device like this off of a charger like that, where it's one simple tiny little adapter that gives you 100 watts and is driving both this Mac and this iPad that you're using as display, or even this USB-C display that you decided to pick up for just $100 on Amazon. Again, I'm really excited. The only thing I don't know about is if it would ever realistically supplant something like an Apple TV, because we're talking about, you really have to make margin on an Apple TV, and the storage that you need minimum on a Mac would probably scotch that pretty badly. But and Apple isn't the kind of company that would do sort of a multimodal Mac Mini, where if it detects that you can have like what did they call it? Stage mode,
right, center stage.
Center stage mode, where you can actually just say, just as some other older Macs used to be able to do through the operating system. If you activated an infrared remote, it would just simply say, "Okay, I'm an Apple TV now," or excuse me, I'm an entertainment screen now.
Lean back, nice. Lean back mode. Yeah.
And the only advantage of having it be a real computer that replaces the Apple TV is the ability to do more games, like so now you're just doing Mac games can be played on the TV, and it's just there. And so, and I think that is because, I mean, the reality is the Apple TV app environment is kind of a disaster. Like it's like it's dead. So they're like, nobody really looks at any of these apps anymore. And so I think that area is there's not really anything to protect there, because no one's really building. I don't think anyone's really doing anything serious with apps.
Could you make a Mac Mini, M4 Mac Mini?
I think you could bust $400 easy. I think you could even do $300 if they're interested.
It's a premium of a couple $100 over an Apple TV, but you get a Mac.
And I could see them just saying, leaving the Apple TV on the SKU, but having a $299 Mac Mini as the base. It'll probably be $399. It can't be. I don't think it'll be the same $599. I think it will go down a little bit. But I don't. But I have no idea how much. I think the Apple TVs have a lot of margin in them. I think they're very cheap to make, and I think that there's not a lot of connectors on the back.
That's for sure. Yeah.
You wouldn't necessarily need to take the chips that run them, even though that they are high-powered chips. You don't have to take them from the center of the wafer. So the thing is that because they're not being pushed very hard. And
they're probably excess, as you're saying, excess.
Probably the ones that don't test it for everything else, and so they're probably not. It's probably not a very expensive item to do. So I think that would be, if it became a rage for Apple, I think they want to make sure that the margin's there, because they could end up selling a lot of them.
I would just hope that it wouldn't take the place of the Mac Mini in my mind, which is if they decided to make it, these are going to be tiny little hockey puck devices. They're designed not for power use. They're not for regular use. They're essentially like the netbook of the Mac line, so to speak. I would still want the ability to have a really powerful desktop and the ability to buy something that is large and substantial enough to have the sort of cooling that you would want to have with some beefy multi-core processors. So I would hope that I really want this to happen, but I wouldn't want it to replace I wouldn't want it to be the entire Mac Mini line, unless I wouldn't be giving up any options when I'm buying a Mac Mini.
Well, it sounds very much like on the inside. I mean, this is one of those cases where the external case design is actually happening later than the internal choices that they've made, because they could afford to stuff the old stuff the things in the old case, and it works fine because it's just air in there. But like in the long run, they seem to have made their decision about the desktop, which is they're going to put the M whatever and the M whatever Pro, which require less cooling in the Mac Mini design. And then they're going to put the Macs and the Ultra chips in the Mac Studio design because there's a lot more cooling and therefore they can run because they run a lot hotter. So I think that will continue, right? Like I do wonder about the price. I would imagine that they will build whatever enclosure they build will be able to handle the heat thrown off by a Pro chip, not just the base chip. The Pro chip's a little bit more. And remember, they've differentiated the Pro and the Max a little bit more than they used to. With M3, they made the Pro is a more like a super powered base chip and not like an underpowered high-end chip. And so it's into this whole scheme of separating the Mac Mini and the Mac Studio. So I think that makes sense. In terms of price, I think it's a really interesting point. It's very rare that Apple goes down on price. However, I will say Mac Mini base price used to be $499 the very first time out the door. That was the cheapest Mac ever sold. And the next year they took it up to $599. It would be sweet if it was $499. That would be a really for the base model. I wouldn't put money on it. Never bet on Apple lowering prices ever. But that would be pretty sweet if it was kind of an underpowered, not enough RAM, not enough storage, $499, and then you have to go up from there.
Well, should Apple worry about cannibalizing the laptop market? It's one of the things people were saying is, "Ooh, this would be fun. I could put it in my pocket and carry it to work and hook it up there."
But it's got no screen, and I mean, it's It's less than 25% of that Mac market is desktops now. So it's a niche computer, but it's a great nerd toy, and it's a great affordable Mac for people who've got a monitor, and you buy this and you attach it, and you've got a Mac for even $500 or $600.
What does this
pretty good.
mean for the Mac Studio?
I think the Mac Studio, I mean, Mark Gurman says that it's going to be getting the M4s next year. And I think it's this dividing line, which is they view the Mac Studio as a, basically the replacement for the Mac Pro for most people. And it's going to use the M4 Max and M4 Ultra chips, presumably, and be the high-end desktop. And then, the Mac Pro will get updated to just presumably be just kind of like the Mac Studio in a bigger case.
And I love what Apple's done with that, which is that the Mac Studio and the Mac Pro are essentially the same, except that the Mac Pro has more I/O. It's like the Mac Pro is we're just going to give you, you put cards in it. You have 8 channels of Thunderbolt, and there's people like me that probably my next Pro computer will probably be the Mac Pro because I need all that I/O, and so I really want to have that I/O in a computer, and I'm very happy with my Studio, but I also have, I have a Studio and I have 5 Mac Minis in my kit that are on my desk, and we use the Mac.
You would love it if it's the size of an Apple TV, right? I mean,
if it got smaller, it'd just be even better. I mean, it would, and we use them for glue. Like we just use them for all kinds of things. So for instance, our most popular way of using these Mac Minis is for scopes. So we take video, we run video into the Mac Mini, and we have all of the scopes that we used to pay tens of thousands or thousands of dollars for are now done in software. We use a program I think I've recommended at some point called Omniscope. And so Omniscope, we just run that signal in, and the Mac Mini, runs at like, I don't know, the current M1 with 8 gigs, I think runs at like 22%, to run that. And that's a perfect example of a $500 solution of something. And that's all. It's just, for us, it's just an appliance that does that. And we have, because of that, we have lots of them, and so having them be smaller would be even better. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. As long as we don't give up I/O. The biggest thing that I worry about, the biggest reason that I tell people, you might want to get to the Mac Mini Pro, or you might want to get to the Mac, to the Mac Studio, is more monitors, more Thunderbolt, more everything. So my only concern would be if all of the Mac Minis, including the Pro, went down and lost some of the I/O. I would love for them to just go ahead and get rid of because they take up a lot of space. The
USB-A ports. Yeah,
I'd rather have 2 more USB-C or Thunderbolt ports on the back, and those are going to be more compact. And theoretically, you could have 6 of those in the back with on a Pro, you could have 6 of those in the back with maybe one of them being power, or 7 of them with one of them being power. That kind of thing.
This is the Pro, right? Because it has. Here, I have to hide my eyes so the camera will focus.
And then, lean up a little bit so we get some light. Hold on, there we go. Shadows right now.
It's got, I need more light. So, this is funny. I took this out of the studio. This is the 8 gig RAM Mac Mini that was running Zoom ISO, what we're doing right now.
Right.
That's all it did, and it's a full-time Zoom ISO machine. But I have to say, it's, if you make it the size of an Apple TV and you have to add a dongle the size of an Apple TV, it's not much of a saving. So you got to have the connectivity.
Yeah. But the usage of a device like that, of a Nano Mac Mini, Jesse sent a milli, micro, nano. Yeah, exactly. Nano, Mac Nano.
I like the Mac Nano. I do like that. You wouldn't, and not, the Mac Shuffle. It doesn't have any ports.
And now you can have socks for it. But yeah, it wouldn't bum me out as having to donglify a device like that wouldn't bother me as much. So if we had 4 equivalent Thunderbolt ports on it, where any one of them can be power, all of them are high speed, and it supports at least dual displays, I wouldn't be that upset about it. I'm only upset about dongles when it's something that is inherently supposed to be a portable device, like like again, not having and where especially when there seems to be enough room to put a headphone jack on an iPad, but they decided not to. Like that.
If you add little things like if you put the HDMI and the Ethernet on the, if you put those 2 things on in addition to those,
true.
A lot of things simplify. And the problem really is the handshake on the HDMI. If it's a desktop machine, the handshake of only using USB-C is a little complicated on the Mac, actually. Okay, so you really want that raw HDMI output if you can. It really needs one. So I think that you'd end up with an HDMI output. And then I think I'd love to see an Ethernet output, because that's otherwise going to be a dongle.
I think it's gotta be. And then everything else you can take Thunderbolt. And again, if you really need more ports, you can get a lot out via Thunderbolt and into a hub or something like that.
Yeah, and again, we see a lot of ports on little boxes that are the same size, or the same size as the proposed. It's definitely possible.
Yeah, and the Mac Studio. I mean, there's also traditionally there was that talk of like, Apple has design, absolute design rules, like no ports on the front, and the Mac Studio broke that seal. Right, Mac Studio's got ports on the front. I've got a card reader down here. I got 2 USB-C, right, and then 2 Thunderbolt on the back. So they could absolutely, and I would encourage them. I hope this is the case, that they've got some ports on the front and some ports on the back, because it's going to be a small space geography, but there's room in there to have front and back ports, and that's great.
Yeah, someone asked me how often to use that SD. Like, you see that SD card thing? How often to use it? And I was like, every day. Every day I use that SD card, and it's so convenient to have that part of the computer.
And let's not forget that this is the Johnny Ive era is now so far behind us that most of the people who were part of his team, who were in senior positions, have now moved on. So if there was a dogma that said that, that would be nice, but it would disturb the lines of the thing, or God, I want to have as few openings in this thing as possible. Maybe the new era of designers are going to say, function is absolutely, tell us what this thing has to have. We will simply, it's our job to make it look good. And
I think there is some pressure for Apple. I mean, I know the desktop isn't as important, but when you have people like me who are pretty dyed-in-the-wool Mac users buying PCs because they're smaller and lighter and cheaper, that there's a missing market there, and Apple usually likes to build options for everyone, of going up and down. And I think that this is a growing market, because a lot of the PCs, the Raspberry Pis, everything is getting faster and more effective in that sub $500 range. And there's a big market there of people wanting to use these for glue and to do other things. And I hope that Apple takes advantage of the size and, goes down to $400 or even $300 for the base unit would be amazing.
And it might help the Studio, because there's now a bigger differentiation between the Mini or the Nano and the Studio. And
so it makes the Studio feel more substantial, and it needs that space in order to do its cooling.
I think so. Yeah. All right, let's take a little break. That was the rumor of the week. We'll get to I don't know if we even have a Vision Pro segment, but we will talk about a big controversy that's brewing now around Apple and Patreon in just a moment. You're watching MacBreak Weekly. I am in the new Attic studio. I hope we're tweaking everything. I think we had some trouble with sound on Sunday. We had this great studio, and we had very expensive Telos Axia processing from a thing called an Omnia, and we're trying to duplicate that sound, and I think we decided we can't duplicate it. So we're just gonna do it as flat, and if you're watching the streams, if it should sound okay, and then Maybe in the post editing, we'll fix the levels, we'll compress it a little bit so everybody is easily heard, even if the audio levels vary a little bit. And I think we're going to leave it at that. So give us your feedback. Always welcome, of course, especially our Club TWiT members. I'm always paying attention. But now that we're streaming in a variety of places, I can see the streams and the chats from YouTube and Twitch and Discord and everywhere. Twitter, Tweet. Everybody. So please feel free to give us there's all the places. So give us the feedback because I really appreciate it. Our show today brought to you by 1Password. Actually, this funny story. Funny thing happened on the way to 1Password. You may remember we did ads for a while about a product called Kolide, Kolide, really cool authentication program that took the authentication to the next step to make sure that, the users who they say they are, but are their machines secure and safe. And it's a great product. 1Password acquired it a few months ago, and we thought, this is really exciting. Can't wait to see what they do with it. Well, now we know they've made a really cool unified package called the Extended Access Management from 1Password. 1Password Extended Access Management. Let me give you a hypothetical. Do your end users, are they always using, the company-owned devices? Here's your laptop, here's your BlackBerry. And are they always using IT-approved apps on those? No. You know they're not. With BYOD and Shadow IT, how do you keep your company's data safe? It's on all those unmanaged devices and apps. Well, that's where 1Password Extended Access Management is so cool. It's the first security solution that brings all those unmanaged devices and apps and identities under your control. 1Password EAM ensures that every user credential is strong and protected, and every device is known and healthy, and every app on those devices is visible. It solves the problems that traditional IAM and MDM can't come close to touching. They like to, 1Password says, imagine your company's security like the quad of a college campus. You got your nice brick paths between the buildings. Those are the company-owned devices, the IT-approved apps. It's so pretty, the brick with the ivy and all the managed employee identities, and everybody's fine as long as they stay on those little brick paths. But the problem is every college campus has them. The paths people actually use, the shortcuts through the grass that are actually the straightest line from point A to B. That's what the users want to use. Those dirt paths, they're unmanaged devices, they're shadow IT apps, they're non-employee identities like contractors. And most of the time, the security tools you use are working fine on those beautiful ivy-covered brick houses and the brick pathway. But most of the security problems, they're happening on the shortcuts. And that's where you need 1Password Extended Access Management. It's security for the way we work today, available now to companies who use Okta. But here's the really good news, and this is where 1Password's really been a great partner. It's coming later this year to Google Workspace and Microsoft Entra. So check it out, 1password.com/MacBreak. That's the number 1, PASSWORD.com/MacBreak. We thank them so much for their support of MacBreak Weekly, 1password.com/MacBreak. It's a match made in heaven. So is this fabulous panel. Always a pleasure to have Andy Ihnatko. We can see the books behind you. See, I had to actually buy the books behind me. You've got. What does it say? Somebody sells his acres. Hoxie sells his acres by Christopher Lafarce.
That's very good, Leo. Now
that sounds like a fake book.
Read line number 3 and cover your left eye.
Then behind you is John Casey. I can't make out the title though. No, it's nice. You're in a library. You should have books. Yes. I had to buy my books. I don't know. Can you see? The
Alex, can you now buy like inflatable like lines of books just for people who just want to make a good show of their background?
You know what they do is
that's a good product.
You could buy book by the foot, you know.
Yeah, you can do it. And a lot of times what we do for sets is that we cut just the ends off. So it's like the first inch of the book.
It's a veneer.
All there. It's like
book veneer.
You want you want the geometry of it, but you don't actually want the weight. So we just have just the spines in about an inch, and we glue them all together. And then they're like little sections, and you just put them up, and they look great.
18 years of a man's life
are real books.
Wow.
Those books right there, this foot and a half, those are the books I wrote. Then there's the Delphi 3 Super Bible, Paul Thurrott's book right there. These are all the books on this shelf are books written by people who we have on the shows. Underneath that is programming books, my Lisp library beneath that. These are real books that somebody has read, not me, but somebody.
Somewhere, probably, presumably.
I like having a real world space for my studio. I think it's pretty cool, actually. Thank you, Alex, for helping me get the setup, dialed in. These cameras are great. The Sony FX30s using a Rodecaster Duo, which I know Alex would disapprove of. Especially since I have a sound devices right
sounds
there
good
on my desk. Yeah, I think it's good.
Yeah.
And I don't think that your sound devices can do things like
this. Hello, everybody.
It does not.
Now how do I turn that?
Oh, there we go. Okay. There's also
kill him while he is weak now.
There you go.
I can bleep that, I have the bleep button. I know, I love that monster voice.
What's this? Oh, this is a robot voice.
All right, I'm going to stop that right now. We're going to go back to the show. This is
Leo, do I need to come over there and take that with you?
They're going to cut me off from the pad. I won't be able to
bring a pizza and 2 meatball subs.
Apple comes under fire for Patreon commission degrading its brand. This is from 9 to 5 Mac. So Apple is charging, talk about rent seeking, 30% to subscriptions to Patreon creators that you buy on the Apple device. Gruber himself at Daring Fireball said Apple's degrading its brand. Macworld says the company's charging for providing negative value. Patreon says, all right, we're going to add 30% if you want to subscribe on Apple devices.
Yeah, this. I've always said that Apple is generally like a very nice company. If it were a person, it's someone that you enjoy hanging out with. They're nice. They have interesting ideas. The App Store is drunk Apple. It's like, okay, I don't want any part of this. And this is just so stupid. So according to Patreon, they had sort of like a handshake agreement, like that. Okay, well, technically, we'll say that your memberships, Patreon memberships, don't really count for a 30% kickback to Apple for whatever reason. But recently, Apple said no. You have to. The app has to switch over to Apple's payment system and has to kick over 30% of all fees and all subscriptions that go back.
Position on this is that there is an exemption if the money the users pay goes 100% to the recipient, but because Patreon takes a cut,
10,
by the way,
10,
I should
12%.
mention, yeah, our club TWiT is through a Patreon company called Memberful. Same thing. Yeah. So because Patreon takes a cut of that money, Apple says, no, we're going to have to, starting in November, we're going to have to, they're going to have to be in-app purchases, and Apple will apply a 30% App Store fee to all new memberships.
This is just absolutely disgusting behavior. Okay, because I've never liked this aspect of the App Store billing, even when it was defending quote unquote like Amazon and booksellers from saying, well, why do I have to spend 30% more for a book? Like, what did Apple do to justify a 30% cut of a $25 online book purchase? They did nothing. If anything, the presence of the Amazon and the Kindle app on the iPhone platform helps Apple and helps the iPhone, but they've done nothing to justify a 30% cut. Now, when you get down to like when a good friend of mine and an artist, Danielle Corsetto, does amazing stuff on Patreon. She's a cartoonist. She's done she completed a 12-year run on a comic strip called Girls with Slingshots. She's starting a brand new graphic novel And for my happy fee, she does weekly, like a daily comic, like every weekday, in addition to art lessons, in addition to sneak peeks, all this sort of stuff. And now the idea that she will receive 30% less from people who like sign up for Patreon via the app, because Apple decides that, no, they're 30% responsible for that artwork. They're 30% responsible for that audience. They did 30% of the work, and by God, they're sick and tired of being cheated. Like, what a bunch of chiselers! This is really, really disgusting behavior on their part. Okay,
John Gruber writes, Patreon's messaging on this change seems pitch perfect to me. They're not whining. They're not calling for users to get their pitchforks out. But also, they're making crystal clear that these changes and the timeline for implementing them are demanded by Apple, and that Patreon benefits from these changes not at all.
Well, I think the problem that Apple has is that Jack Conte is probably the coolest CEO in Silicon in the world.
Yeah,
he's just such a cool dude, and I think that it's just really not the guy, because he's not the guy that's going to get into the big crazy fight with you, but he's still going to win, and so I think that the problem is he's just so nice. And
you're saying he's not epic. He's
not going to get hyperbolic. He's just saying, hey, this is what we have to do, and this is what we're going to do. He's not throwing lawsuits. He's not throwing whatever, and he's allowing the market to do what it's going to do, which is be upset, and I think it's very odd. I think the hard part is that, because Apple's also talking about, you can't go around them and everything else, but it's kind of like, okay, well, with Kindles, I'm buying stuff from a web page, like I'm subscribing, I'm buying the books from a web page. I can't buy them in the Kindle app on the phone or whatever. I don't think Apple's getting any part of that, and they're not charging, when people subscribe to, it could be easy enough for people to say, well, if they subscribe on Patreon's web page instead of their app, that they get to keep it all. And I think that Apple's closing that door on this as well, I believe.
Hamish McKenzie, sure, who's the founder of Substack, writes on his Substack about this. He's the title of the article, The Price of Payments, How Should In-App Purchases Work in the Age of the Sovereign Creator? And his point is really, well, this is a kind of a whole new thing, and Apple's just been caught out by the emergence of the creator economy. He says it presents an interesting challenge and opportunity for Apple, and some delicate questions for Patreon, and yes, for his company Substack. We want creators and subscribers to benefit from the power of Apple's in-app purchases. That's a very, as you've always said, Alex, a super convenient way of doing this for anybody who's selling. He says, in fact, at Substack, we've been working with Apple to bring in-app purchases into our app. But, he asks, how much is the ease of in-app purchases worth to creators? That's the salient question. We found that creators are comfortable sharing 10% of their revenue for Substack's tools, but another 30% on top of that. At first blush, that price seems high, but we have firsthand experience seeing the potential that could be unlocked when the company gets its model and execution right. And we're grateful to our relationship with Stripe, for example, for similar reasons.
And to be clear, I just want to make sure we're clear about what we're talking about here, is that it's not affecting current subscribers. So this is from Patreon Zone. So
it starts in November.
And it's only applied to purchases that happen within the iOS environment. So, and I will say, I didn't even know I could pay for Patreon on the iOS environment. Like, it didn't even occur to me that was.
I think I am, actually. And this is the convenience that Apple offers, plus the ability to unsubscribe very easily, which is I think a big feature. Makes me want to pay for everything in the App Store.
It does, but that's the value that Apple brings to the user. So the thing is that it is.
But is it worth 30%?
Other payment systems exist. They're not that much harder to work with. Well, I do like the idea of having a central dashboard for all my subscriptions, but this is Patreon. I already have a central dashboard for all my subscriptions.
That's true.
Well, and I have to admit, I kind of don't want to know. Like, when I subscribe to a bunch of Patreons, and I have a bunch of people that I I have like a $5 or $10 thing, and it's because I believe in them. I don't really, I'm not here to try to get whatever special value I'm supposed to get. I just think that that's an artist that should be supported, and I just give them money. And I kind of don't want to see it. I kind of want to show up think do I really need to do that? I'm happy with a couple dollars, rolling out every month to some folks. I know that if a lot of people do that, they can keep on doing what they're doing. But I will say, so I just want to make sure we're clear, though. It's not like we're going back and Apple suddenly saying you have to pay 30% of everything that,
No. Just for new subscriptions.
And it's just for new subscriptions that are there in the app.
And you have to do it on iOS.
Yeah, because Apple... Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
What will quickly happen is that creators will tell people to go, what will... The result of this will probably be the creators in every one of their streams and everything else. Number one is they can set it up so that it's 30% more, and 30% more on the App Store. And number two is that they'll tell people
just quickly.
Constantly.
Patreon is saying we've added a feature so that if you want that to happen, click this button and it will be handled for you automatically. They're recommending that people don't do that, but they're trying to make it as easy as possible for
And then the because that's what X did, right? X just says it's 30% more if you subscribe through your phone. Like they just...
Does everybody do this? Spotify do that? I think a number of people charge extra. Yeah.
Yeah, they keep on charging more. So I don't know. I mean,
it's hard to tell.
Keeps on turning it up. I don't know we don't know exactly what they're turning it up for. I stopped paying for Spotify.
Jason, are you a Patreon? Do you have Patreon on your
I do
site?
Memberful, like you do, which is
but that's Patreon.
Same company, but it's sort of white labeled and not really it's not really crowdfunding. It's a different kind of thing, which I prefer, and I know you guys prefer it too. It's good. Yeah. But I think this does. I agree with everything Andy said, but I think this is just Apple at its basest rent-seeking behavior, where it believes that if there's anything that happens on the iPhone, they deserve a cut. That's basically what it is, unless it's in a web browser, in which case they probably aren't happy about it, but it's not going to get a cut. But I wanted to say, even with Apple's own terms, it actually shows you a way that Apple is behind the times in understanding how this stuff works, because Apple has based everything that it's tried to do to make them seem not as bad over the last few years on the idea of, look, we're not trying to soak the little guy. And so they did their whole small business program where they only take 15%, right? And
after an outrage,
there's this whole idea, right? And the problem with that is Patreon is the interface with Apple. So as far as Apple's concerned, even though I saw somebody estimate it's well over 90%, and it may be more like 95% of Patreon's people they would qualify for the small business program. Because they're all rolled into Patreon, they just have to pay 30% forever. They don't get 15%.
And that seems
they don't
like
even get the half off. And we could argue like even the half off, even the 15% is not so great. But the fact that isn't even an issue here, because Apple has decided, no, there's just one thing, and it's an app, and it's Patreon, and they're the middleman, and therefore we are also now the middleman. And there's two middlemen, which you can't do. It doesn't work economically. But Apple's rules, and again, I see people argue like, well, but these are the rules. It's like Apple makes the rules. Apple could change the rules. They choose not to.
Yeah, and I think that, and I will say that, I mean, again, I think that eventually the process of having subscribers paying the full boat is going to end. Like Apple, This is not a sustainable. This is whether it's Epic or Patreon or dating apps or whatever. The process of this, it's going to be like publishers are treated slightly differently. With what percentages they pay. That Apple kind of capitulated to, and I think that. This is an area that because of some of the stuff I do, we pay a lot of attention to. and you just know that it's not, the 30% is definitely not sustainable. The 15 is probably not sustainable. I think that for subscription services like Patreon, it's going to probably land somewhere between 5 and 10%. It's not going to be zero, but it's not going to be 30. And I think that's going to be, yeah.
This will put pressure on Apple. Apple's premise in all of this is that the in-app purchase is so convenient and such a great experience that it's worth a 30% tariff. That's basically what they believe. They believe it's so great. And the counter argument to that is what will probably happen with Patreon, which is, people will start buying things outside of the app more than they already do. I think all my Patreon subscriptions are from the web anyway. Right?
Again, I didn't even know I could do that. I never used the app.
I didn't either. And I think what's interesting about that is if Apple is more or less wrong here, and that people will just use the web, that puts pressure on Apple to compete a little bit, right? Like, what is the right number of percentage that you would be willing to give to Apple in order to make it that much easier to give you money via your Apple credit card, linked thing via in-app purchase? And I'm sure there is a number. I've talked to developers who actually feel like the 15% for them, for apps, is pretty good, and apps are a little bit different, but it's that idea of like, well, yeah, but it's just right there. And
the problem is
there's convenience, but like, what is that number, and will we ever see that? Because I do think that Patreon ultimately is just all those subscriptions are just going to go to the web because nobody's going to want to pay Apple.
Yeah, and Apple's argument, of course, is that people are only upset because they want to be able to do this because it's really convenient because they built an infrastructure that made that happen. The issue is that it is a huge damper on a potentially massive market. So the subscription market, the marketplaces, and I'm not talking about like the second marketplace. I mean, that's why they want to build the second marketplace. And I think that Apple's creating these second marketplaces, and they're creating all of this stuff by making it too high for that specific vertical. And I don't think that they have to give up 15% per app to say, if you're doing a subscription service or a sub marketplace inside, we're going to take a smaller percentage to allow that to flourish, because I think potentially on Apple's side, it could make a lot more money.
They would
if
just
everyone's
have to
buying
choose
and
to do
selling,
it.
But people aren't buying and selling at the rate that they could on iOS. I would argue that it is probably 10 times less usage of a marketplace in the App Store because of the percentages that Apple takes. If Apple made it 5% or 7% for a marketplace, like define it, like this is a marketplace, you're selling things. And now people will argue, well, now they're going to sell all their apps inside of that, and then Apple makes less. So it's got to be, they can set up a subscription service, and it's this, and they can put it into a small window. But there is a lot of opportunity there that is just not, it doesn't exist at 15%, and it doesn't exist at 30%, and it would flourish at 5 or 7 or something like that.
Right.
And
this is untenable
for that specific, but that for a specific vertical, I don't think that they have to like unroll the whole thing.
Right. Yeah, they can make a new program with new rules. And in fact, given the way this story has gone so far, I would not bet against the fact that Apple will at some point announce they're doing a new friendly thing that is for certain kinds of content through certain kinds of apps where they change. Somebody's pointed out that if Apple took its percentage from Patreon's percentage, that wouldn't be a problem. I mean, Patreon wouldn't like it, right? But it wouldn't be Apple taking candy away from a baby, right? It would be a different story. It would be like I could see them saying, "Oh, well, we've got this new program for independent creators that we're with special partners, starting with Patreon and Substack, that it's going to work this way." And because Alex is right, I do believe at this point that they are preventing a whole other class of transaction from flourishing.
And I think this is where they get themselves. And I think this is where they get themselves into antitrust, is by using a marketplace. And when you start to see users completely not able, a market not even occurring because of something that they're doing, they put themselves in a real bind. And I think that they're going to have to solve this pretty quickly now.
It's a bad mistake to make for a company that relies on creators.
It seems like an unforced error.
And keeps hawking on itself as being a very human-oriented company. This is one of the main
creators may be a little sensitive after the giant press crushed all of their tools for creation into an iPad. I think creators might at this point, it only takes so long before they start thinking, maybe Apple isn't.
Yeah, but
the creator company,
that ad didn't cost anybody money. That's the big difference. It's like to me, it just comes down. There've been a lot of really good arguments.
But it's just a pile on. It's more of the same.
It doesn't feel good when there are a lot of huge success stories on Patreon. When you can do the math and see, well, if this person, according to the bio page, they have currently 2,000 something paid Patreon supporters, and their minimum support level is like $5, you can calculate how much money they're making on Patreon. Okay, but there aren't a lot of those success stories. For a lot of people, it's like this is the ability to make this I need 2 jobs in order to get by in the world. With Patreon, my second job can be creating art and selling prints and writing stuff and being a creator instead of cleaning houses or flipping burgers. And now when Apple, a $2 trillion company, says that, that $75 like beautiful hand-bound book that you sell through Patreon, this is Danielle Corsetto put her entire comic series, this beautiful 2-volume slipcase. Like, I'm entitled, Apple said, this $2 trillion company saying I'm entitled to 30% of that price because we feel as though we've justified 30% a cut from that transaction because of all the value that we've created for you. And when you think about how on the App Store, and again, it used to be a lot less fair for creators over there too, until Apple started to feel the heat and they suddenly decided to start dropping prices and eliminating prices for people who are small creators. When you realize that as an app developer, if I'm a small app developer, I don't make a whole lot of money off of it. I'm using Apple's App Store to market and sell my app. I have to, but again, that's a value. I'm using Apple's developer tools to build my app, which I have to, but again, that's value. I'm using Apple's APIs. I have to, but that's a valuable thing. Apple can say that, well, yeah, they did contribute a lot to my ability to make this great app, and even so, I'm making $500 or $600 a month. They're taking none of it. But again, Apple says that book that you're selling for $75, we deserve 30%. We deliver so much value for that transaction. Right. You owe us. Thank God for us, because otherwise, how will you be able to sell this book through
That's where it falls apart, right? Yeah. Is that they're no longer making we're building the APIs and the developer tools and all those things. And this goes back to I think when I said that they're kind of behind the times, I think this is what it is, right? Is that they view everything through the lens of app developers owing them money. And the problem here is that just as Amazon is not an app developer when it's selling you a book on Kindle, Patreon is not an app developer when it is acting as a conduit so that a whole bunch of people who are never going to build their own apps can reach an audience. It's something different. And that 30% or even 15% makes some sort of sense. We've argued about it, but some sort of sense. At least I'm willing to hear the argument of like, oh, well, we built the infrastructure and the apps and all that. But for something like this, it really comes down to, well, we're providing a payment infrastructure and we helped your app developer build their app. But like, come on, it doesn't scale when you're talking about thousands of creators. And so, yeah, it's an own goal. It's an unforced error. And it's something that they probably will maybe address at some point because it makes them look terrible.
The reality is it looks really, really bad for Apple. It probably will not affect the creators that much because they're going to focus everybody on buying stuff from the web. Their current subscribers are not going to be affected. So there's not going to be like, it's probably not going to have an actual impact on that many creators in a main. It's very unlikely.
I would not downplay the impact these days of the YouTube influencer.
No,
and
I'm
if
saying
you start to get a campaign on YouTube.
I'm
people going, Apple is evil.
Right.
It could actually impact you.
What I'm saying is, I don't think it's going to financially actually impact the creators that much.
No, I understand, but don't piss off creators.
No, and I was going to say, well, I was going to say it's not going to affect them financially that much. It's not going to make, as a result, it's not going to make Apple very much money. It's just going to put Apple in a big white hot place, and there's no upside to this for Apple other than, and there's all downside. I think that they're going to have to find a middle way pretty quickly because they're going to keep burning until they get their hands off the plate.
The Macalope writing in Macworld, to your point, Andy, said Apple's forcing creators into funding models that work for Apple, but not necessarily for them. A lot of creators create things when they have the time to create them, not on some predefined schedule. Apple's obsession with subscription-based revenue is something that lets it level out its quarterly results, but it's now having a knock-on effect on other platforms.
I wonder if they're going to change if they do wind up losing that $22 billion a year from Google for Google search placement on devices. I wonder if they're going to be encouraging themselves to find a way to make up for that shortfall in services wherever they can. So I hope that this isn't the start of something really, really bad.
Yeah. Well,
or worse.
We'll see what the backlash is. It ain't going to be good. You're watching MacBreak Weekly. Andy Ihnatko, WGBH in Boston. Where are you going to be on GBH next?
Thursday, 12:45. You can listen to it live or later on WGBHnews.org.
And you'll be talking about the incredible DDoS attack that took Twitter down.
Well, that Trump and that Elon Musk, they just can't catch a break. I just feel so sorry for them.
I feel so bad
bigger
for them.
Sad sacks you'll never find.
Jason Snell. Jason is at sixcolors.com/.
Right. I chose a domain 10 years ago when I bought that domain, and it's almost exactly 10 years ago. I decided not to have Mac in the title because I spent 10 years at Macworld with everybody saying, "Why are you writing about the iPhone? It's not a Mac. Your name is Macworld." I'm like, okay, no Mac in the name then.
Why didn't you call me and tell me? I would have named the show something else.
Well, yeah, but I think you were already up and running, right? Like that's the thing is that so I went with the more generic Six Colors Apple reference instead, which has served me pretty well and was a bargain. I had to use a domain broker. It cost like $3,000 or something for that domain. Totally worth it. I really sweated it 10 years ago, and now I'm like, are you kidding? I would pay a lot more for that clear.com for the brand with words that people understand. Yeah, baby. Yeah. I'm very happy to have it. So yeah, sixcolors.com. And you want to stick a U in there if you're a Commonwealth type person, it redirects. I gotcha.
Also with us, Mr. Alex Lindsay, Six Colors. Not Six Colors. See, I'm one behind.
It rolls off the tongue. It's a beautiful name.
It's
WGBH.
officehours.global and 090.media. Thank you all for being
here. I think if we haven't published it already, we will publish the TWiT session that we did in Spatial with new audio. So we're going to put that up to make sure people can download that. And with our next, I'm just putting it out there for people to know, is that our next Spatial event will most likely be August 27th, where we are. We think we got it all sorted out, but we think we're going to be able to do a concert out of the record plant with
how cool
friends of mine. so anyway, there'll be a bit mixture of a live stream as well as a spatial stream. So I would recommend people still go up and get on the beta. The band, it turns out the band playing the next night is a band called the Verve Pipe. so anyway, they have a little single called Freshman, if you haven't heard it. And
for the life of me, I cannot remember. I'm not going to do the whole thing. We'll get taken down by somebody.
But we're talking to the Verve Pipe about it, and so we'll be able to confirm it next Tuesday. But I think it's close enough. I was trying to work out all the stuff before the show so I can talk about it. But I think we're in our final lap there. So we'll be streaming that both on YouTube as well as spatially. So stay tuned for that and make sure that we know that you're there. So it should be a fun one.
The beta is Stream Voodoo, the Voodoo spatial app that you need for your Vision Pro, and it is in beta right now. But there's a little link that says "Join Beta," and you can get that.
Yeah, and then we'll also use your sign up there to tell you that the concert's starting. So
perfect.
So definitely, and that'll be if you have a headset. I think that the show went pretty well, and we're excited to do the next step. So it should be fun.
Where would they go to get the spatial version of TWiT? Are we going to do that, post it, or?
I think Stream Voodoo will do it. So we'll have a link. We'll have it by next week, if not earlier. And I'll probably tweet it out, and then we'll make sure that you have it, and you can retweet it or whatever, and we'll get it there.
We'll get Ty, our marketing guy, all over it. That's great. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Jason. It's great to have all three of you. Our show, of course, today brought to you by you, the people, the people there in the club. Yes, we love you guys, and we're so grateful for your support. And we'd like to have more people in the club. The more people in the club, the better the job we can do. It is, less expensive not having a big studio. We've saved at least $5,000 in electric costs alone, but that's a month, by the way. But we would like to do more, and with your help, we can. I mentioned that we're going to do a little coffee show. I've always wanted to do a show about coffee, but I didn't feel like there was enough material for a weekly. So now, with the help of the club, we don't have to do advertised, sponsored shows. We can do shows that the club supports. So Mark Prince, the coffee geek, and I will be getting together on Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2100 UTC, to talk about the making, the drinking, the buying of coffee and coffee gear. Our first ad hoc from the attic special. So thank you, club members. And if you're not a member of the club, I would love to get you in it. It is a wonderful group of people who are smart, interested in technology, a huge variety of types. It's a great community. And our Discord is, of course, where we all meet. You can get into the Club TWiT Discord, get ad-free versions of all the shows, join in on the various special programming we do just for the club, get video for programming that we put out as audio only, and on and on and on. But the real benefit is you're supporting us to keep doing what we really want to do. I think what we do well. And with your help, we will be able to continue to do it. So twit.tv/club TWiT. Don't worry, I'm not going to turn this into a pledge fest every week, but it would be nice if you would join. We'd love to have you. twit.tv/club TWiT.
You should see the tote bags. Oh, man. If you donate now, that tote bag could be yours.
I wish there were a tote bag.
I think I also have a DVD of Are You Being Served we can throw in as a bonus just to keep that vibe going.
No, not going to do that, I'm afraid. Not going to do that. So, macOS Sequoia, we are getting closer. I can't believe summer's almost over. We're getting closer to the release of a new iPhone. We don't know when that'll be, but I think
probably
it's
4 weeks. 4 weeks from today is my guess, yeah.
Yeah. Not necessarily the day after Labor Day, so the week following. You're thinking.
Right. It's 3 weeks to the day after Labor Day, but 4 weeks to where I bet they will have the event
and makes
announce.
Sense.
And then they ship the next week. Yeah.
Yeah. So, wow. Can't believe that. And of course, when that comes out, we'll get iOS 18.
Yeah.
We will also, will we get Sequoia around about then, you think? Or
I mean, sometimes it's a little bit later. Sometimes they sync it up. I actually prefer it when they sync it up because otherwise you end up with like a really awkward few weeks where the Mac doesn't do things that everybody else does. Like, they're going to put in those new emoji tapbacks and stuff, and it just like let everybody have that. So hopefully it'll all happen in mid-September, and Sequoia will be in there with iOS and iPadOS and watchOS and tvOS, and they'll push them all out at the same time. That's my hope.
You are, of course, as many of our listeners are, using betas. The public betas are out for all of this stuff. I actually went to the public betas. I'm using it on this machine right now. I'm maybe regretting that.
I'm on Sequoia beta right now too. Yeah.
You did complain on Six Colors about Apple's permissions features.
Yeah, I mean, this has been a problem since Catalina, where apps that you install yourself have to get your explicit approval to like look on the desktop or look in documents or all sorts of things, and they've had some issues where like you migrate to a new computer and then every app on your system asks for 10 different permissions all at once, and you get like this cascade of like 60 different permissions requests. The news story is that Apple has introduced some new warnings, and it seems like it's all around screen sharing. And their concern seems to be that apps could be used to spy on you, which, I mean, we all have talked about, in fact, how Microsoft's feature that takes screenshots and then saves them, like it's a huge potential privacy issue, right? Yeah. So what Apple, and also like the bartender story where that venerable Mac utility got sold to a new owner and it has screen sharing permission. And people are like, well, wait a second, who are they and what are they doing with screen sharing? Now, bartender, a lot of utilities just use screen sharing for these innocuous reasons. They need to snap something to see whether the menu bar is up, or default folder uses it to cover an ugly graphics glitch that happens when they're doing their thing so that you don't see it. Like it's like innocuous, but it does mean they have access to your whole screen if they want it. So Apple has done a few things. They have deprecated their old, it's very much like what they've done with Photos access and Contacts access, where what they want to do is be the middleman and say, all right, instead of letting an app see everything, we're going to have the app request from the system that they want to grab a window or a screen, and then we'll deliver it to them so we know what they're doing with it. And that is a more secure system. So they built a new API for this, and they want developers to adopt it. The problem is that, first off, a lot of developers are unclear about what's going on. I've heard from developers who say that they've adopted what they think Apple wants them to do, and they're still getting this dialog box. And the dialog box has changed in the new beta. Great news, everybody. It used to say, approve for 1 week, which basically says to the user,
I've seen
hey,
that. It's
you want to use
crazy.
this app? Every week you will press a button to use this app until you give up and stop using this app, or the developer gives up and does what we want. And as I've said, a lot of developers are like, we don't know what you want. It's not clear in documentation. It's not clear what the policy is. We don't know what to do. And that's on Apple for not educating them well enough about this. Good news, though, in the latest Sequoia beta, it says approve for a month. But this goes to my complaint, which is, first off, it's abusive of the user. I get the idea that if somebody is surreptitiously installing screen monitoring software on your computer, if they could approve it forever just then and you never see it, that's probably bad. But I do think that and then giving the user a chance to say, you know, I do want to use Zoom to share my screen. Stop asking me. And this approach doesn't let you say stop. It will just kick the can down the road a little bit. I think that's super insulting to the user. And it's, like I said in my story, out of balance. Like, I want them to protect people's security and privacy, but they need to worry about the user experience and not degrading it, because not only does it annoy users who just want to say yes, but eventually everybody will just say yes, because, and that creates a huge security problem, because if you have 20 different dialogues, you just get fatigued and you just agree to everything, because you know if you disagree, it'll break some software somewhere, and then you're going to be on hold with support. So you just say yes, at which point you've completely foiled the idea of being an informed consumer who is approving permissions in computers. So and then one final point about this, which is, I know it's a developer beta, so theoretically, or a public beta, it's a beta, it's early yet. But I also really don't like the fact that Apple is trying to drive a wedge between users and software that Apple doesn't like or doesn't approve of. And this is not just with the gatekeeper stuff, where they make you go through all these hoops to run apps that they haven't notarized, where they use scare language to say basically apps that Apple hasn't seen are malware, which is unacceptable and inflammatory. But with something like this, I also think it's super insulting to the user, because what the dialog box they put up says, oh, this app that you rely on isn't doing things the way Apple would like, and therefore you have to approve it every week or month or whatever. And fundamentally, what you're doing is you're punishing the user, hoping that they will then punish the developer so that the developer changes their tune. And that's not how you do this. You got to go to the developer. I would almost rather Apple say, hey, Zoom, if you don't do this by our new version in the fall, it'll just break. I'd rather them break old APIs than foist this allow for a week or a month on the users, because first off, it's my Mac. If I want to say yes, at some point I need to just say yes and not be pestered anymore. And two, I really don't like the idea that I'm being used so that I get bugged and then bug Zoom, because Apple's like, it's not us, it's Zoom. They're not doing what we want, when it is them. Like there is a disconnected Apple. It started with Catalina. It continues, which is Apple rightly wants to protect its users and protect us from doing stupid things. Okay. But at some point, if the user thinks they know what they're doing, they need to be allowed to do it. And Apple, when they say for 1 week or 1 month and not eventually let you just say, stop asking me, that is the ultimate insult to a user.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a way to talk to, to have certified developers and so on and so forth as well. I mean, Zoom is probably the perfect example that of someone who basically builds everything exactly the way Apple asks for it to be built. Like there's no like stepping over a line. So if you see Zoom asking for something, that's as good as it gets. That is, they're following every API, every security protocol, they're doing everything by the book with Apple. And so if you're seeing a request there, that's the least amount of intrusion you're going to get.
Yeah. I don't love the idea that they're exhorting the user, to essentially to shame the developer. Like, that's not the way they do. Now, my understanding is Apple did reach out to a lot of top developers about this API change and all that. But like on Mastodon, I have a nice cross section of indie developers who are like, what? And then when they look at it, they're like, I don't understand what's going on. And that's on Apple's developer relations team to do better documentation and add more clarity here, because some of these developers are pretty wired in and they don't even know what to do. That's not great on top of what they're doing to the user.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I've always liked about the division between iOS, iPadOS, all the iOS stuff, and macOS is that it allows Apple to have things both ways, where the ideal thing to keep the system up and running and to make sure that the user has a positive experience is to take the iPad approach, where everything is super locked down. And if it means that a lot of things are less convenient or impossible, the point is to keep this thing secure and safe and make sure that it's always running. Whereas on the Mac side, the idea is to make it more like a traditional operating system, where it is my computer. If I want to take risks, I can take risks. If I basically do the calculus and decide that this app, I know it has not been signed by the app, it's not by a signed developer, I know it's not part of the App Store, but it is exactly the tool that I need at this moment, I am willing, and I've done my homework to make sure that it's not being talked about as a Trojan horse for anything, I can click on this and actually run it. That's really the right balance. I don't like it when iOS dogmas and philosophies start to creep into macOS. And Jason, I love that piece because it was completely right. It's punitive, and it's basically turning the users into the people who are going to try to hopefully manipulate developers on Apple's behalf. It's not necessary. It crosses the line from previous editions where it's no longer trying to keep people safe. Remember that previous editions of the OS with unsigned apps did what I thought was something very, very smart, which is it would throw up a dialog saying, this is unsigned, I'm not going to let you run this. Go to settings if you want to run it, and then you'd be presented with immediately, well, you came right here from that dialogue. I assume you want to run this app. We don't think that's a wonderful idea, but we will let you do it just by clicking this button. That's a great compromise between safety and giving the user power. But to make a change where it really is warning you that this thing is going to blow up if you click this button. We're not going to let you option click your way through this. We're not going to make this any easier. We're going to make this such a pain in the butt to use this app that, for unfathomable reasons, don't they realize that we at Apple, we have a beautiful plan for their life. Come to us willingly and let us give you the grace of our experience, and let us accept your gratitude for us existing. It's like, oh God, you done. Captain Kurtz has gone upriver. Just pull back a little bit, Apple. Yeah, pull back.
I just think, again, there was a WWDC 2019, I want to say, where somebody stood up on stage. It was when they introduced notarization, and they said, "Look, we know this sounds scary. We are never," they said, this is an Apple person, "we are never going to prevent you from running software you want to run on your Mac. But we're worried about some of it. And so we want to introduce a middle path that is not the Mac App Store, but that we can do some basic cryptographic signing, which means that if it gets tampered with later, it won't run, and scanning basically for really bad stuff, bad malware. And if it gets notarized by us, then you're safer than you would have been, and they can kill it. Although they can kill anything on the system if they really want to." I appreciated them standing up and saying, look, we're going to let you run whatever. We just want to create a safer path for a lot of software. And the fact is, most outside the Mac App Store software is notarized. There are some programs that aren't for various reasons, and I think that's okay as long as we get to run them. But it gets back to that larger point, which is, why does the Mac exist? The Mac exists to be a computer in a way that the iPad and the iPhone are not. We might wish them to be more open. Some of us might not, because there are benefits in them being closed. But the Mac is different. And I realized a long time ago that I'm never not using a Mac in my life. If that's never not going to happen. I will stop. I'll buy a bunch of old Macs and just keep them around if I need to. But I'm never going to switch to Windows or Linux. I'm just never going to do it. I will say though, once they stop letting you run the software you want, I feel like that's when you just sort of say, I'm never updating my system again, because that's why we use computers. So I think that I think it's admirable that Apple wants to protect users. My podcast pal Mike Hurley said yesterday, what you have to fight against is the one user problem, which is, but one user might do something stupid and wipe their hard drive or agree to malware. And it's like, yes, one user might, but you can't ruin it for everybody because of one user. You can make it safer for that one user, but if they really want to do it, you have to let them, because the alternative is something so locked down that the Mac that I bought, that I run, that I personalized to be mine, doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to Apple, and I'm just paying a subscription every month where I click the button to allow my screen sharing utility to continue working.
The philosophy is screws, not glues. If you want to put security screws on something to make it difficult for me to take apart a computer that I own, that's perfectly fine. Don't glue it together to make it impossible, because it's still my machine, and that applies to software and user interface.
It's my machine, and I can ruin it if I want. And if that means that it's ruinable by a person who gets talked into it by somebody on the phone who's doing a social engineering scam or something, again, mitigate it. Ask again in a certain number of days when they're not on the phone with that person, and have them realize, oh, what did I do? But you can't just wipe it away entirely and make it impossible.
I think the good news is this is something that can easily be fixed. It's a
beta.
A little timer, and you say the third time they click it, give them the option to say forevermore.
Right.
And then it does the job. And so it is a beta. Let's hope. Apple, are you listening?
Yeah, and talk to your communicate better with your developers. Clearly, the number of developers I talked to who are baffled, that's not good, right? That's not good. Even if they did personally go to a bunch of the high-profile ones, like Craig Hockenberry at the Icon Factory should not be completely baffled about what the rules are here. He is a pretty wired-in developer, and he's like, I don't even know. Is there an entitlement? Do we switch to the API? Does that API ask now? That's not great. So some more clarity, better communication with developers would help here too.
I know that if you're using the beta, you have that little app added that you can report errors and stuff. Do developers have a special, even a better channel?
Nope.
No.
No, I mean, they do have developer relations people that they can talk to. There are human beings that they can talk to. Filing a feedback is kind of the number one way to do it. But there is also a behind the scenes, if you have a contact within developer relations that you can talk to about this. And, I was surprised because there's a piece of shareware that I've been using since the 90s. I mean, when it was shareware, called Default Folder, and it's really great. And I use it to this day. And this is where I first saw this thing. And yes, people are like, well, why is a folder default, open and save dialog? Why is it grabbing a screenshot? And like I said, the reason is because in order to do what it does, it manipulates the open and save dialog box for you in a way that throws up a bunch of weird junk in the UI. And so they take a screenshot and cover it, so you don't see the weird junk.
Oh, and that's interesting.
He's just trying to make, honestly, it's a Mac developer trying to make his app nicer, which is what we want Mac developers to do. And then Apple's like,
should default folder be acquired by somebody who then downloads every screenshot, you might have a problem.
Which is a thing that Apple doesn't seem to have thought about, right? It's a little misplaced. That I would like more warning if the app changes hands or something like that. But anyway, there is a new API. I think what is going to happen here is that there's going to be more clarity about what's going on. Developers are going to understand it a little bit better. I suspect that there will be OS updates to make this a little less onerous for users as well. But I hope somebody inside Apple learns a lesson from this whole conversation that a lot of people have been having this summer, which is, every time you make an incremental security, privacy, permissions change, you have to think about the user experience. And I got to be honest, in the last 5 years, it feels like for every 100 hours they put in on security and privacy in macOS, they put in 1 hour on the UX. And you can't do it that way. You can't. It's a price. The cost of the alerts has to be paid for by improved user experience, and they're shirking on that side of it.
You're watching MacBreak Weekly. We're not shirkers. We're working every Tuesday, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. That would be 1800 UTC. And you could tell because I have a Nixie clock behind me that has the universal coordinated time on it. Wow. How fancy is that, huh?
Got the blinking lights back there, too. I love that. I feel like if you keep those blinking light computers there, I'm going to I keep waiting for Captain Kirk to come in and try to create a logic loop that makes it explode, right? It's very
they're running programs. There's this one's
a PDP-11 or something back there?
It's called the Pi DP-11 because it's running a Raspberry Pi PDP-11 emulator. And then underneath it, that's an emulator for the MITS Altair 8800, which is the first personal computer, the one that got Bill Gates out of bed and into Albuquerque. So it's fun to have those, and the blinking lights are cool, but it's doing work. I don't know if it's useful work, but I know every once in a while it solves, maybe it's a Bitcoin hash. I don't know, but then I have to reprogram it with the switches on the front of the Altair.
Nice.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. Then, we come back into the 80s and I have a Mac 128K, thanks to Jammer B, John Slanina, who donated that to the museum because he said, I don't want any more crap. All right, on we go with the show. Let's do the Vision Pro.
Vision Pro. Oh, Vision Pro. Vision Pro, please don't go.
I'm looking forward to hearing from Quincy Jones. But anyway, there isn't that much Vision Pro to talk about. Here is an article from Gizmodo. It took Apple's $3,500 Vision Pro to make me appreciate Nintendo's Virtual Boy. Okay.
I love this. Yeah, I mean, you remember Virtual Boy was 1995, a Nintendo system that was like an enormous pair of like goggles that was on a tripod you had to put your face into, and was such a failure that's mostly famous for like being discounted to like $49 at Toys R Us everywhere. And so actual 3D, but like red LED, like games and graphics.
Now you can experience it for a mere $3,500.
Yes.
Holy cow. This is an app. Yep. The Virtual Friend app. And apparently it has the games and everything. Oh yeah, there it is.
Yeah. I mean, there's some, it didn't last long enough to get like a whole bunch of unique games, but there were some titles, including, I think, a Mario title that was exclusive to the Virtual Boy. So the only way to actually experience it is through emulation this way. And I just love the fact that, I mean, emulation on this device just seems really great. It just by virtue of being able to change the kind of screen that you think that you're looking at, or even the room that you're in. Like, there's something about like a original NES that says, I should not be seeing this in like 4K dual screen HD. I should be looking at this on like a 19-inch Sears color TV, sitting cross-legged on like a woven carpet with a 2-liter Mountain Dew next to me. So yeah, I very much approve of this use of the Vision Pro.
Cool. Very cool. And according to Mark Gurman at Bloomberg, Apple is continuing to work on smart glasses and a less expensive Apple Vision for 2025.
I feel like the big news here is that they are paying attention to what Meta is doing with their Meta Ray-Bans and thinking of, I mean, this is a natural, right? It is not that far off from AirPods.
Yeah.
And from other stuff they're doing with Beats, and you get Siri in there and you connect it to your phone and it's a pair of glasses. Like these are, Gurman described them as being glasses without displays, right? Like he wanted to be clear. Yeah. They're not working on glasses with displays yet, but I feel like this is a logical step, that those Meta Ray-Bans sound really, really cool. I have friends who really love them. And
I do. I love mine. They sound great.
You work on Vision Pro on one end and you start there on the other end.
Yeah.
And then maybe at some point that technology comes together down the road. But in the meantime, I think the existence of the Vision Pro shouldn't prevent them from doing something like a pair of smart sunglasses that don't have a display. I think they're both reasonable products.
And I love the idea that they're pursuing this, even though it's not like the Vision Pro is like of such a traditional Apple product where it's expensive, it's fashionable, it's at the cutting edge of what's possible, the best materials, the best manufacturing. But the idea of just have glasses that don't even have a display, they just have good speakers in the temple pieces, they have good audio pickup for your voice, and they have a camera. The ability to not just take pictures where you go, but just the ability to be at an electronics store and say the orange cable third from the top left, is that going to work? Is that going to be able to charge my MacBook Pro? And it grabs the video, it identifies the product, looks up the SKU, and says, yep, that will work with your MacBook Pro. That sort of stuff is game-changing, and we don't need really expensive hardware to make that happen.
And that's your Vision Pro segment for this week. You had something else?
I got one, a real quick one.
Yeah.
Vision Pro elephants to go with the rhhinos. They're beautiful.
Nice.
Elephants.
So some of the immersive stuff, the rhinos are just amazing. It's some of the best immersive stuff I've seen shot. And so I'll be interested in, and I have to say I had the opportunity, I was working, doing some work with a company called Radiant Images last week, and they do stereo cameras. And I can tell you that truly shot 3D footage on the Pro is amazing. On the Apple Vision Pro is just amazing to look at. And so I think that it'll be really interesting to see where that market goes. We were able to look at a bunch of really cool images that we were testing. It was awesome. Here's
what I would say, if you can hear me, which is I think we should do this as part of the Vision Pro update every time there's new content until it seems ridiculous to talk about new content.
Look at the list of animals in 3D.
I feel like there might be some value in doing the kind of drip, because everybody who's used it, and I feel this way, I know Alex feels this way, the content is so amazing, and there's almost none of it. So let's talk about that.
Last week, I also did an informal test of when will they tell you to take the Apple Vision Pro off when you're on a plane. And the answer is when the plane is mostly empty and you need to leave. I was in some movie and I just lost track of everything. Wow. And I was like, did
the flight attendant gently tap you on the shoulder and say, "Mr. Lindsay"?
I got tapped and I pulled my headset up and half of the plane was gone. And I was like, I better get.
You've arrived, Mr. Lindsay.
So they don't bother you too much with it. And it's not worth $4,500 to fly with, but wow, does it make it amazing. It is just, as soon as we take off, I zip out the rest of the environment. I sit down and I start watching movies and doing stuff. It's just, it's really amazing to do that. If I was still flying the way I used to, I would definitely think it was worth $4,500 just for that.
Nice. Okay, Jason, I agree. Every time there's a new little tiny bit of content, we will do a Vision Pro segment just for you.
Because on top of everything else, if there literally is nothing to be found or talked about, and we just have to stammer for 3 to 5 minutes, that in itself will be an update and a commentary on
the Vision
Pro.
Yes. We can use the music.
There's nothing to know.
Jingles in a podcast are really good, is what I'm saying. Jingles are great.
Vision Pro.
Oh, skilly wow.
Vision Pro. Vision Pro. Please don't go.
Hey, if you want to know what was going on in the European Apple stores during the 2010s, apparently a time capsule router that contained hard drives with all of the information was leaked and is now online for sale. A trove of Apple corporate data, a Mac Mini from the Foxconn assembly line, an iPhone 14 prototype, and more. How exciting.
Yeah, this was cool. So this was a presentation at DEF CON this week where a security researcher wanted to look into what are the security, how much of an attack threat or security problem is it? The fact that corporate-owned devices sometimes get lost track of and get sold on the open market, even by people who don't know what they are. So he got into a habit of just buying up lots of these things, and he just bought this $40 $40 time capsule. Wasn't even advertised as, oh my God, this used to belong to Apple. Oh my God, what secrets does it have? But he bought it. Everything had been deleted from it, but he was able to restore all of it, and it contained a complete backup of all the data.
There was a hint because the label, the photograph in the listing had a label on the bottom of the device that was clearly visible saying property of Apple computer, expensed equipment. I'd have bought that right away, right? He did notify Apple about the findings, and apparently Apple asked him to give it back. Can we have that back? That's property of Apple computer.
There's going to be a bunch of conversations. There's going to be a bunch of new policies A lot of meetings.
I think this happens all the time. I guarantee you, if anybody wants to know the inner workings of TWiT, that many of our old hard drives will be available on the secondary market soon.
Yeah. I mean, I had a little bit of a scare with my MacBook the other day, where for a good 45 minutes while I was running a treatment procedure on it, it was like, okay, either this will work and everything's just fine, or I got to figure out what I haven't backed up on this device yet, because if I lose this drive, I won't be able to recover anything from it. And as bad as that would be, I had also remembered that, but it also, whereas a generation ago, I could just attach it in disk mode and just mount it as a FireWire hard drive and still access all my data. Maybe it's not a bad thing that if this thing is stolen, you still need passcodes. You still need to get through the encryption to get at the data. But yeah, this is going to be still a very, very big deal.
We probably should mention we started a little late today because of Google's Made by Google 2024 keynote. They did about an hour and a half talking about the new Pixel phones. They did actually do a side-by-side comparison. I don't think they've ever done this before. A photo on a Pixel 9 and a photo on an iPhone 15 Pro Max. Google did it a little earlier this year. I think they're trying to get a little jump on Apple's iPhone announcement. And of course, when you show a picture from Apple's iPhone, it's the current one, but it's not the new one.
Yeah. And it's so hard to really accept these kind of demos. I don't think it's
fair. Yeah.
Yeah, because, I mean...
It was a night shot. It was very dark. The Apple thing looked pretty dark. It was of the Grand Tetons.
But I mean, both any phone of that caliber, any phone that's one of those top tier phones is, I think, roughly on the same level. And all of them still have the problems of every mobile phone that will always have, which is that there's always going to be a circumstance where it just didn't get the right white balance, or a circumstance where it got outfoxed by the focus or by the exposure. And it's hard to say that, well, they picked 6 photos that look really, really good, and that really shows you the difference between these two. When you add the ability to, I think all phones are pretty much the same. If you add 10 seconds of pushing sliders around in the stock Photos app that comes with the phone.
Put it on a tripod. Absolutely, could look.
It's most useful when I wish they would do more of here is this generation's iPhone. Here is compared to last generation's iPhone and the iPhone from 3 years ago, as a way of convincing people who are maybe thinking about, well, gosh, my iPhone 12 is still working fine, no broken screen, it still does what I want it to do. Showing them the differences between what the modern camera can do versus a 3 or 4 year old camera. That's what will get people to say, yeah, you know what? I got $800 to $1,000. Maybe it's worth me upgrading. That's significant, not the apples to oranges.
And by the way, Burke McQuinn is yelling at me right now. He says, you would know there are no TWiT drives on the secondary market. We wipe the drives and we give them to Russell, who either degausses them or crushionators them.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I stand corrected. Sorry, Burke. I don't think there's anything really on those drives that anybody cares about, but I'm glad you wipe them. That's a good thing. Yeah. All right. Let's wrap things up and get your picks of the week. Gentlemen, prepare your picks, as they say at the Indy 500. No, they don't say that, actually. You're watching MacBreak Weekly. Jason Snell, Andy Ihnatko, the great Alex Lindsay. Alex looks prepared. Are you prepared to give us your pick of the week?
I am. Yeah. You want it right now, or you're gonna? Usually we have something in between.
No, here's the problem when you don't have any ads. There's nothing to separate the content. A wag once said that the articles in a newspaper were there to separate the ads. And sometimes I feel that way about podcasts. We're just here to separate the ads. But in this case, no ads to separate us from our wonderful audience.
I realized that the thing I was going to offer was in the system. So if you're wondering whether I'm using what I'm recommending, yes, it was in the system a second ago.
That's a risky thing to do. You just unplugged it?
It's fine. It was just for my monitor. So this is this is really cool what Audinate does with this. This is a Dante Avio, and this is 2-channel to analog. Now, there's lots of these, and I think a couple of years ago I might have recommended Bluetooth version of this. But what this does is, if you're using Dante, and Dante is a protocol that we use that for a lot of our productions that allow us to seamlessly pass audio from all kinds of hardware to another. So you can sit there and route. If I've got 32 channels of something from a mixer, I can route some of those over to my computer. I've in the past recommended Dante Virtual Sound Card, which means all my computers have DVS on them. And so by putting this, I was trying to figure out, I had a speaker here that was plugged in to one of my computers. And I was like, it'd be really nice if anything I want to come out of that speaker, I could just pass it to there. And so that's what this does. And I realized I could just go buy it. We have lots of these at the office. And I was like, oh, I should just get one for my home office. So what this has is Ethernet. You can cover my eyes. It has Ethernet on one side, and that's PoE. So it might be PoE plus, but it's PoE. And so it's powered by the Ethernet cable that goes into it, and then it's got 2 XLR outputs. And you can buy another one that has XLR inputs. You can buy ones, there's lots of different options. So what I did is I just plugged this into my speaker, and now I have an Ethernet that goes into my speaker, and anything that I have that has Dante that I want to send to that speaker, I can simply send it over. Cool. And that's not just my computers, it's my mixer, it's other, like I can do all kinds of things. And so by having one of these, it just makes it, and in the office we use it because we oftentimes want to have 5.1, or we might want to have different programs going to things. And instead of having to run all those audio cables, we just run one Ethernet to it, and then I can route whatever I need to in and out of that system. So, and I just thought it was, I had it in the system. I just recently put it in, and I thought, oh, it's a really handy little tool. So anyway, that's my pick.
When we designed the attic, I really wanted to Dante all the things, but
I'm a big Dante guy.
The idea is, instead of analog wires, you connect audio devices with Ethernet.
Yeah, and I do as much as I can. If something has Dante, I generally am going to use it. It's a it is it's
expensive though, right? I mean, it's more expensive than speaker wires.
Well, kind of, except for the thing that it's a really cheap to run these little Ethernet cables over to my thing. And the problem is that what I realized was trying to figure out how else I was going to route it to that speaker. Now I route everything to that speaker. In fact, I have one of these any device that I have that supports Dante, I can route to that speaker and or speakers. Like, so for instance, I have another set of these. And I'm in the process of I didn't have it in my office. I have a 514 system for work. But at home, I didn't have that. And I'm going to drop a 5.1 system in my house or in my office, and to connect it all rather than trying to figure out, audio cables and everything else. It's just these Audinate.
Yeah. Once you do it, everything is easy.
Exactly. Once you do it, every time you add on to something, it's just like anything goes in, anything goes out, and you can route it.
Is there like a primary locus where the main Dante?
No, they all talk to each other. There's a controller that the controller controls the routing, but they're all talking to each other. The only thing that's important is that you do have some piece of hardware like this in the network somewhere, so that it can the clocking works. If you connect DVSs to DVSs, if it's all software, you may have problems. But if you have one piece of hardware, and I already have a Studio Technologies device here, and I have a bunch of other things that are already there, so it's not hard to only one device, and then you're set. So but they all talk to each other, but they're controlled by a controller that's a piece of software that you can open up. It's really super useful.
Dante Avio or AVIO analog adapters. And where is it getdante.com? That's where you should go to find out everything about it.
You can go there to find out more about it. I bought this on Amazon.
But it's a proprietary. It's like there's a company that does it.
They provide a chip, and there's other protocols that people use a lot. All the mixers have some other protocol, which is I don't want to pay for the Dante chip, protocol. That's how we look at HDR10 plus is I don't want to pay for Dolby, right? And so it's I'm too cheap for Dolby. And so the other ones are that way. There are a couple other ones that are really good for a lot of scale. So but this one is so simple and so easy to use that if it supports Dante, it's a lot easier.
Thank you, Alex. Andy Ihnatko, pick of the week.
After there's so much discussion over the past month or so about Apple finally lifting restrictions against game emulators on iOS, it kind of reminded me that there are a lot of games from like the 80s and 90s that I kind of want to revisit. So I started taking a look back at like emulators for Mac of all things. So a couple of recommendations. There are two that are really good, but they've got individual problems. The first one, RetroArch, is kind of like the gold standard. It's open source. There are no like permissions issues with it, like in terms of like, is this going to be okay running on my system? It's compatible with everything. It's really whatever platform you want to emulate, it'll work. It's great, but oh my God, the interface is so bad. It's not just bad retro. In terms of but realize that like there are times where we all wore like wooden shoes with nails through the heels. That's retro. But retro we've moved forward. Like just because it can run like a game. I've got a Game Boy ROM that I want to run on it. And just the idea of pointing it at like the folder where the Game Boy ROM is, you can't like, there's no like, oh, there's a file picker. No, there's like an Android style like screen, and you have to use the arrow keys to navigate like list items. Oh my God. And you're not sure you've done anything. Once you get it working, it works, but oh my God, is it terrible. Now, but the yin to that yang is another project called OpenEMU, EMU, and it's, user interface wise, it is the opposite of that. It's beautiful. It's almost like Plex for games. It'll get metadata from the internet once it recognizes the ROM, organize your library. It's beautifully to work with. But the one problem with it is when you start it up, it says that, the macOS pops up and says, this app is asking for permission to observe all keyboard activity across all apps. Do you want this to happen? And that's where nope. I'm suddenly like backing all the way out until I can do enough research to make sure that there is nothing nefarious or even potentially nefarious about this app. I did get it working with a game controller over USB, and it works fine for that. But it's like, why are you asking for like? I understand that with a lot of people, they don't want to just revisit old games. They want to be like Mr. Hacksaw Ninja as they were in 1991 in middle school, and they want the zero delay, and they want to make sure that they can strike like a serpent. And maybe that's why it's asking for special permission so that it can basically be as responsive as possible. But that's one thing that. You don't like eat gum off the sidewalk, and you don't run apps that ask to see all keyboard activity across all apps. And so I'm not recommending it. I'm naming it so that if you want to spend time that I have not invested yet doing searches everywhere to find out what horrible things have happened, if any, by running OpenEMU, go ahead and do it, because it looks good. It's exactly, I wish that it was just the interface to RetroArch. But two things to look at: go to archive.org, the Internet Archive. You can find ROMs for pretty much any Mac game, Apple game, Game Boy game. I've got a whole bunch of like 80s Apple games I'm sort of lined up that I haven't played in like 15 years. The last time that I got into emulation. But both of these are free because they're open source projects, and just enjoy the adventure, because it's going to be an adventure.
Zidane Rick in our YouTube chat says OpenEMU is great. It just needs more regular updates. He also recommends you check out Emulator.js. So something more to check out for you. And Jason, go ahead.
By the way, tying into our conversation with Jason earlier, OpenEMU is unsigned. So as an unsigned app, so you're going to enjoy, if you're running the beta, a full demonstration of exactly how excited Apple is about helping you to run unsigned apps.
Oh boy, the fun and games just getting started. And now, Jason Snell, your pick of the week, sir.
Hey, I am going to pick a brand new iOS and iPhone OS app called, or iPad and iPhone app, Shareshot. Shareshot is, if you are, I use it because I write about software and stuff, but if you're in documentation or IT and you need to provide screenshots of things happening on Apple devices, my friend Federico Vitici wrote a very complicated shortcut that does this. Well, now there's an app that does it, and it adds a bunch of things like beautiful backgrounds. So you take a screenshot, you select a screenshot from your photo library, and then it will frame it with the device image. So it is not an out of context image. It will frame it with a device. You can often pick like what color Apple Watch, what color iPhone do you want it to be? And then a whole bunch of options for the background, from transparent to gradient. You can choose the aspect ratio of the image. You can choose like a drop shadow, or for there not to be a drop shadow. Just a huge amount of options. There are things that are missing. You can't frame, for example, 2 or 3 images in a single, which they need to add. That's a must for a lot of what I do, is because the iPhone is very vertical and I often have images in very horizontal spaces. So I want to put 3 iPhones in there with 3 examples, but it's really well done. It has a very specific purpose. I was very impressed with all of the options that you get: gradients, solid colors, transparency, and all of those device frames, which it's loading. It looks like dynamically. So when you load a particular screenshot, it can go and get it, and then it holds onto that image. And they look beautiful, and you get to choose how big they display, and like it's all in there. So if you find yourself taking screenshots and sharing them and want them to look better, Shareshot is a great way to do that. And it just came out, so they're running a special where it's a subscription app, so there's a special lower price for the first year. And I bought the first year, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes, because they definitely need to add some more options and add the ability to do multiples. But I'll tell you, sharing a screenshot of an iPhone app where it's in an iPhone just looks way better. It's way better to see it in context. And like Apple Watch, iPad, you name it, it looks better this way. So Shareshot, brand new on the App Store.
From the Montana Floss Company.
Indeed, the Montana Floss Company.
So we know what Frank Zappa did when he moved to Montana. They also have Captionista and Hobson, an insult generator for the iPhone.
Captionista is a really great video captioning app for sharing videos on social media. Yep.
Cool. See, you can move to Montana and you don't have to raise dental floss. Thank you, Jason Snell, 6colors.com/Jason to see all the different shows he does. The upgrade show that he does with Mike Hurley made an interesting discovery thanks to one of your listeners.
Yes,
and I encourage you to listen to Upgrade to find out what it is. How about that?
Especially if you're in the EU and you're a Mac user, you may get Apple Intelligence after all, because the Mac is not a covered platform. Ooh, it's not a gatekeeper platform. So we broke some news. We didn't even know. One of our listeners broke some news for us.
Isn't that nice? Thank you, Jason. Andy Ihnatko, WGBH this Thursday. It's great to see you in the library there and the library in Boston.
Again, thank you for public support.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. That's not just for working for an NPRP public broadcasting station, but also, again, working in a public library. Thank you, everybody.
Yes.
Thank you, property owners.
It's all about the public.
Yes.
Yes. And thank you to Alex Lindsay, officehours.global, if you want to check out what they're up to every day. Something exciting and new. What is this? Human AI created humans?
Oh, we were talking humanoids. We had a discussion yesterday about just AI and what the impact will be on mechanical humans. And as we've talked a lot about robots, but as AI starts to get to apply to them, we started having a discussion about that. So it's good.
Not to be confused with RoboCop, who is a cyborg, as I learned yesterday.
Yes.
My chagrin.
Yes.
And
should really be called Cybocop.
Cybocop.
Yeah, exactly. It's not my fault. Thank you, Jason, Andy, Alex. Thank you all for being here. We do MacBreak Weekly Tuesdays, 11 a.m. Pacific, when Google doesn't interrupt with their thing. 2 p.m. Eastern, 1800 UTC. You can watch us everywhere there is streaming video, or download a show from twit.tv/MBW, or watch on the YouTube channel. There's a link at twit.tv/MBW. But the best way to watch or listen, because we have audio and video, is to subscribe in your favorite podcast player. That way you'll get it automatically as soon as John Ashley puts the finishing touches on it later today. If you're not a member of the club, we'd love to have you. twit.tv/clubtwit. Thanks, John Ashley, this is our first MacBreak Weekly from the attic, not our last. And I know there's always a little bit of, a new way of doing things. It's a little bit tricky, but John, you did a great job. Thanks to Anthony Nielsen, who was working overtime to get all this together. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. Now, even though I am in the attic, it is still my sad duty to tell you, you got to get back to work because break time is over. Bye-bye.